to sound like a native. This is what they sell you guys. This is what you aspire to as an English learner or of any other language, to sound like a native and stop sounding like a foreigner. That's the dream, right? That's the goal. That's the ultimate objective of learning English, isn't it? Should it be? Or perhaps we need to question this perception of what constitutes speaking the perfect, in inverted commas, English. Hi, I'm Maria. I am a native level English teacher of British English, and welcome to my podcast where I'll be offering some of my opinions and different points of view and just different thoughts on this whole experience and this whole objective, and perhaps challenging it a little bit. Okay, so let's start first of all thinking about what does it mean to sound like a native, right? Because when you talk about native, are we talking about American English, British English, Australian English? South African? Native is English is a first language in the Philippines, for example, and other countries. So what does it mean to sound like a native, first of all? How is it geographically defined, first of all? Second of all, even if we dive in and go, okay, I want to sound British. What does that mean? Do you want to sound like the Queen? Do you want to sound and speak like the standard BBC English? There are so many accents and ways of speaking and different words that are used locally across the UK. Even in London, you have a variety, slightly different twang and accent depending on the region, depending on your educational background, depending on your class, your level in a society, which doesn't sound nice, but yes, there is that division as well. Let's be realistic about that. What are we actually talking about? So which one are you aiming for and why? I always wonder, people say, oh, I want to sound like you. And that's a big compliment to me because I work very hard at, softening my accent, which when I first moved to the UK was very strong as a child and then softened over the years. And then I perfected it with my own personal efforts to add on top of, the natural integration. But I still have a twang in my accent. It used to bother me. Sometimes it does. When people ask, where are you from? And I go, well, I have to explain first of all the long story, right? So I think that kind of goes back to the question of why do we want to sound like a native or speak like a native and not as a foreigner? Perhaps we don't want to be questioned every single time where we are from, especially if we are immigrants living in another country. We just want to sound like the locals. We are fed up with sounding like foreigners, immigrants, and we have to, explain that story every single time where you are from. For me, it's kind of funny because when I speak to English people and I do not say that I'm English, they kind of like, okay, so where's your twang from? And twang is like a soft sound in the accent. So it's not like proper accent, but there is that kind of twang. And yeah, so they kind of go, so I can't quite put my finger on it. Like, where exactly are you from in the UK? Or sometimes, I've met people from the north of England and I went, oh, you sound like a Londoner. And then I meet people somewhere else and they go, oh, you must have been living abroad for some time. I'm like, well, I'm actually originally Russian, and their eyes widen, right? So my point is there's always that mixture of identities. And even as a native, right, the Brits, they often ask each other, where are you from? Meaning in the UK, meaning where does your accent come from? Not everyone can hear an accent and immediately know where that person is from. They might have an educated guess, but it doesn't mean they will know for sure. So I think it's a question of identity. I think that's a really big point, that we try to blend in. We want to feel like we belong, and sounding and speaking like a native makes us feel like we belong. So I think that is the big big point that is on everyone's mind, be that consciously or subconsciously. I think as humans, subconsciously, we always want to belong. We want to be part of the herd. We want to blend in. It's safer. It makes us feel more secure. And we are social animals. It makes us feel like we belong socially. We are part of the club. And that's good. Another point that I hear often is that people don't want to sound like they're from their own country because it makes them feel like they haven't studied English well enough. They haven't learned properly. They haven't put in enough effort. So they feel the more effort they put in, right? And we're talking about people who live outside of a native country, and we're talking about people who also are living in the native country, say in the UK, who just don't want to sound like they're from a different country because it makes them feel like they're not intelligent enough to be able to assimilate and adapt that different accent, way of speaking, manner of speaking, right? Because accent is intonation, but it's also, to sound and to speak like a native, you need to adopt the right words, the right expressions, used in the right context. There are so many aspects to speaking like a native. And again, is that really how you test your fluency? I don't know. Again, I always ask my students, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Do you want to blend in, or do you want to just have, strong, fluid, uninterrupted communication without any misunderstandings or minimal misunderstandings, right? What are you trying to achieve? And you have to be realistic about your goals, about the amount of time you're willing to dedicate, as well as the amount of effort you're going to put in to try and get maybe as close as you can to sounding like a native. And that's another thing, right? I never advocate that people must sound like a native or speak like a native, but I don't think it hurts to try and have that sort of direction in mind, because at the end of the day, that's how natives speak, is probably the right way. Again, let's challenge that assumption. A lot of the times, I hear this all the time. I have slips of the tongue all the time. And a lot of natives have slips of the tongue in grammar, in pronunciation, right? It happens. Pronunciation, they usually correct themselves immediately. But I heard the wrong vocabulary being used, the wrong grammar being used in sort of daily communication. And that's not a big deal. So again, does a complete lack of mistakes indicate that you sound like a native? Absolutely not. But you will sound like a super educated, very good at communication type of native. Maybe that's your goal. Again, ask yourself, is that what you're aiming for? Is that what you want? If that's the case, yes, go for it. Keep working towards that. But bear in mind, it takes a while to get there, and it takes a lot of effort as well. And then, I have to make this distinction between British and American English. I do hear a lot of grammar and vocabulary mistakes. They are mistakes in speeches of people in series and shows and films. Again, I don't know. It does bother me, because I think we should try to be more accurate with our own language, especially when we have a scripted plot in a film and they have time to prepare and rehearse it. I don't think it's an excuse, right? When we're in natural communication daily, we can have slip-ups. But when you have a scripted speech that you've rehearsed and probably re-recorded again and again, you can make sure that there are no mistakes. So I think that's really sloppy, and that's really disrespectful to the language. So I personally am against that. But there are people who say, whatever, the language is evolving, it's flexible, it's changing, and we need to just go along with it and not resist it. Different opinions. I respect other people's opinions, even if I disagree with them. But there we are. So yeah, it's just a matter of which native do you want to sound like? Do you want to sound like a native who's like, for example, a BBC presenter, or someone who's in the royal family, or someone who just lives in a normal suburb of London. Again, with what kind of a job and what sort of lex is being used on a daily basis. I mean, what does it mean to sound like a native to you? You have to choose that particular native that you're aspiring to sound like, if that's your objective again. And actually, the professional exams and IELTS exam in particular, for example, and Cambridge exams, they do not really test your ability to speak like a native, because the amount of topics you cover, the amount of idioms and expressions that you are required to learn and to use automatically in your speaking, in your writing, and to write well, it's not something that all natives have as a skill. They need to think about that. They need to develop that ability. Yes, they can talk about different topics, but can they talk about every single topic on the IELTS exam with a preparation and follow the structure and use all the right idioms? I don't think so, right? So again, passing exams does not equate speaking like a native. And that's not to say that natives have lower level than IELTS. It's just the structure of speaking in real life is different to the exam structure. So bear that in mind. If you are passing an exam only to improve your English, I think don't do it. Okay, if you want to sound natural, do not do the exam. Of course, I understand you have to take an exam if you want to move abroad, if you want to get an international job, if you want to apply for university somewhere, a visa, that kind of thing, you have to pass it. But do not expect that exam preparation and studying will get you closer to sounding like a native again. That's a delusion, and you will be disappointed. So, might as well know it from the start, okay? You have been warned. And I just want to get back to that identity thing. So I heard today, I'm watching French TV as I constantly am learning and practicing and improving my French. There was an ad that was advertising some sort of Italian products, okay, or based on Italian, ingredients. They used French voice with an Italian accent, and that gave that advert authenticity that this product is originally Italian, and that's why we have a person who sounds originally Italian. So I just want to encourage people who are worried about the accents, that your accents make you authentic, original, they make you you. And I think it kind of maybe goes back to deeper psychological belief that we need to be someone else, we need to be better, we need to be different, we need to be anyone but ourselves. And love yourself, self-love, self-care, that's the way to go. So maybe if you work on that aspect, perhaps you will accept the fact that you have an accent in the English language as well, and you'll be fine with it. Maybe you'll be working on it, improving it, but you will not be stressed out about it and nervous and anxious, and beating yourself up about it constantly. And that's not the way to go. When you're learning a language, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to be supportive to yourself. You have to be patient and kind to yourself. A lot of self-love is required, okay? In order for that long-term learning, not short-term bursts where you kind of hit yourself with a stick, metaphorically speaking, and think magic will happen. Yes, short periods of time, yes, but over the long term, self-love, self-care is the way to go. So I hope I shed some light on some of the aspects of learning, to speak like a native, or speaking like a native, or acquiring a native-like accent, and just made you think about some of those points a little bit. I wasn't here to provide the answers to all of the questions, but just to get you thinking, hopefully, in the right direction, and consider different points of view, which I hope will help you make the right decision that is for you, for your life, for your goals, for your objective, for your personality. All right, have a fantastic day. Thanks for listening.